So I had a choice today between Washington or St. Louis. So I went with St. Louis because I think Washington's getting close to naming a coach. And, all the interviewing's going on. They're going to name their coach soon. So with that in mind, I decided to go with St. Louis and take a look at the Blues. The Blues who lost in round one to Vancouver. And I was thinking about Arizona as well, but of course they haven't named their general manager yet either. So we'll see. I don't want to cross over into round two losing teams and then have to go back to round one, but we may end up there apparently. So for St. Louis, losing round one to Vancouver was surprising to a lot, and I mean I was mildly surprised, but not entirely. This was a team that came into the round robin kind of, I don't know, loosey goosey. They didn't look very good, and then we end up with a team that in the playoffs they looked better than Vancouver on most nights, but they just couldn't finish it off. And so Vancouver ends up scoring that upset win in six, gaining valuable experience, but raising some questions about whether or not St. Louis can win another Stanley Cup. And these concerns also come from the fact that they have $6.4 million in cap space next year right now. And yes, there are expected to be moves made, as there was already, involving a goaltender, and very likely there'll be at least one more player moved out to make cap space. So the general manager, Doug Armstrong, has done a very good job of building a team that looks like they're a contender. But again, after winning a championship, you want to win a second. When Alex Ovechkin won the Cup 2 years ago, immediately it became, well, we want to win again next year. We want to prove this wasn't a fluke. And there will always be those who will write off a one-time Stanley Cup champion and say, it was a fluke. And it's not fair to players on that team, or, definitely to people who put that team together. But that does happen, where people will say, that was a fluke. See, there was this, and this that all collided, and that's why they won. So St. Louis wants to win another one. Don't fool yourselves. Coach Craig Berube, he has earned himself at least one more first-round exit before anybody would even ask about whether or not his job's in any kind of danger. I'll go ahead and say he's earned himself probably two more because of the Stanley Cup win last year and his connection with the players, which is clear every game you watch of the St. Louis Blues. So their top six is good, but without Tarasenko, and that's the question mark I have off of here, I do wonder, so if Tarasenko never plays again, or if he's not ready for next season and they're playing without him, and at this stage with the amount of surgeries that he's had, we're going to end up having that discussion soon, I would think, on what the status of his career is. So Sanford ends up being in the top six. O'Reilly, Perron, Schwartz, Shen, and I'm going to go ahead and say Robert Thomas hits that next level next year. Maybe especially if you don't have Tarasenko in there, you need Thomas to hit that next level. And then there's Kostin as well. And the question of whether or not Kostin gets a spot in the lineup, and then would he be more useful as a top six than in any bottom six role they give him? And would they be crazy enough to do that? And keep in mind, St. Louis with their roster, they're not scared of shaking things up. You can see a guy who's on the fourth line in one night, first line the next night, and vice versa. And it was a team that really bought into that. We're four-line, six defensemen last year, and it worked. Now, the forward group is pretty solid. It's the defense where I would think the concerns start to rise if they do lose the players who appear to be on their way out the door. Scandella, Falk, Dunn, and Parayko would likely be the top four, with Gunnarsson being the number 5. And then the question mark of Bouwmeester. Is he done? Bouwmeester was supposed to be a UFA after this season anyways. But with his heart condition, I would be honestly quite surprised if he ever plays a National Hockey League game again. And so that's an issue that they'll have to address by bringing in a veteran. But keep in mind, they only have $6.4 million in cap space to do it. So this is where Alexander Steen likely is on his way out of off the roster. But with a $5.75 million cap hit until next year, in order to get somebody to take that on, you'd probably have to throw in a sweetener. Now I don't know if that's a first round draft pick, if it's a second rounder, if you'd have to throw in a prospect or somebody else off the roster to make it work, but to get rid of Steen's cap money, they get rid of that 5.75 million. That gives them 12 million, and then this name Pietrangelo here goes back into that top four, and it makes everything solid again. And losing Pietrangelo out of the top four is huge, and it can't be overstated. And losing Bouwmeester was huge, can't be overstated. So then, does Scott Perunovic end up making the roster? Does he end up pushing his way into that top four conversation? They have high expectations with him. Does he end up pushing his way onto the roster and push somebody down? I will say this: if Scandala's top two, that's a concern. If Scandella and Falk are their top two, that is a concern. And not to diss Falk or Scandella, but if you're going to try to be a Stanley Cup champion again, I'm not sure that gets you there. I love Parayko. I think Dunn's a good defenseman as well. But the other question I would have as well then is, so Falk can score you 45, 50 points, but then where do the rest of the points on the blue line come from if Pietrangelo's gone? So it'll be an interesting issue that they have to deal with. And then, the elephant in the room is, so Jordan Binnington played really well during the regular season. He did. Was he perfect? No. But I remember during the regular season that if Binnington didn't necessarily have a great game, and I mentioned it, that Blues fans would get upset. And again, I get it. He won the Stanley Cup last year. And during the round robin when Binnington didn't look sharp either. Again, Blues fans were like, no, Binnington's the guy, and he's one of the best goalies in the league. But the question I have is, now that Vancouver, to me it looked like they exposed a weakness in his game. And he's been in the league now for 2 years. It is possible that teams have a book on Binnington. And if they do, their goaltending's in major trouble. So Binnington has that cup ring. He was fantastic. I argued him for the Conn Smythe before they gave it to Ryan O'Reilly. I don't have any problem at all with O'Reilly getting it, of course. But I do wonder with Binnington. Is Binnington going to bounce back next year? Is he going to prove that the 2018-2019 Binnington was the real one? Or is he going to have his struggles, and are we going to see him playing like an average, goaltender in the NHL? And, having good nights, having bad nights, not being a Vezina level goaltender necessarily, like this is key. Because Binnington was a huge part of the reason that they won that Stanley Cup in 2019. And then Husso. Is Husso going to be the backup? So if they're going to be in the market to pick up, say, a veteran defenseman, and Husso isn't what they want for the backup if they look somewhere else, they don't really have the cap space to upgrade both. No, without getting rid of Steen and maybe getting rid of other money as well. So that is something that St. Louis is going to have to ask themselves, because they've traded Jake Allen. So they're all in on Binnington. And again, I get that. But just purely looking at it from an outsider's perspective, there is some peril in that if they don't have a backup who can play 30-35 games. Let's say Husso plays 20 games, Binnington plays 60. I don't see St. Louis necessarily contending beyond this year. I think in the cases of both St. Louis and Boston, we could see some fallback from them when it comes to their overall standings in the regular season next year. So, their UFAs, I've mentioned Pietrangelo, I've mentioned Bouwmeester. Troy Brouwer came in, he did the job he was supposed to. I've always been a Brouwer fan. I think he probably retires. I think this is probably the end of the line for him. If he wants to come back for one more year, I'm sure somebody will sign him to a $700K contract. I'll go ahead and say Vancouver was in on him before Calgary signed him a couple years back. Maybe Vancouver signs him for a bottom six role there, and he plays on their fourth line. Because Vancouver's going to need to cheapen their fourth line, and that's a way to do it, is if they can move out somebody who's making $3 million, don't care which one, and they bring in Brouwer and save themselves a couple $1 million in the process. Restricted free agents, De La Rose, not going to get a huge raise, sticks around. Dunn's the problem. So I've talked about if they're going to bring in a goaltender and a top four defenseman, that's going to be tricky at $6.4 million. Oh yeah, and Dunn is a restricted free agent. He's a top four defenseman. He's pretty solid, and he only made, well, his cap hit was only $723K this year. He's going to make more than $723,000. His cap hit, if they only double it, if it's 1.5 million, I would be really, really surprised, considering Stetcher down the road here made $2.2 million for Vancouver this past season. I would think, what, 2.5? So 2.5 million, that takes you down to 3.9 million. And then you've got, again, there's going to be a lot of bookkeeping done by Doug Armstrong this offseason. He's going to earn his pay. And then next year, you have to look at next year with St. Louis, because Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas are both due. And Kyrou may end up being in a top 6 role as well. Kyrou looked very good at parts of the season when they gave him the chance. So Kyrou may very well end up pushing his way into a top 6 role again. Without Tarasenko, that may happen. This is where things get interesting too, because if Tarasenko plays, that 6.4 million is an issue. If Tarasenko is done, if they say, well, he needs a whole year off because of his shoulder, then his cap hit rolls off and they have all kinds of money to spend. But they would need to know pretty quickly here whether or not Tarasenko is going to miss the entire or maybe half of next season, allowing them to spend more money and not worry as much about their cap. So does the Tarasenko injury kind of sort of help them then? In some weird, baffling way? They're going to be an interesting team to watch. Very, very interesting to watch. Because, again, they won the Stanley Cup a year ago, but it looks like this could be a really rapid teardown of that. And that they could be looking to young kids like Thomas and Kyrou to try to get themselves back to the promised land. And we haven't seen whether or not they're able to do that over a full playoffs, especially in Kyrou's case. Thomas, I think we know he can do it. Kyrou, no idea. No idea that when you get to playoff hockey, how he's going to respond. Should be just fine, but we just don't know. The Blues have a lot of unknowns, and they seemingly have more unknowns than other teams at this stage of the year. So let me know how you feel as a Blues fan right now. Are they going to build it back? Are they going to get back into contention in 2021? Or are they going to have more trouble than that? And Tarasenko, does he play? And if he does, how effective is he? And does his cap hit become a problem if he's no longer effective? So there are a lot of question marks with the Blues, and I'll be interested to see how things play out. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.